for women to get true equality, who did not get the right to vote in Switzerland until 1971. In Switzerland, voting takes place at 3 layers of government: commune, canton, and federal. Canton is arguably the most important. Switzerland's 26 cantons are like states. It is quite hard to believe, May Chen.
Oh, no. When I got a Harvard Human Rights Scholarship and went to Geneva, that they were having a referendum at the time as to whether in that canton women should be allowed the vote, and they decided that women shouldn't be allowed the vote. The men said they shouldn't be allowed the vote, and the women said that they didn't need the vote because they could just tell their husbands how to vote. I am going to Basel. I am going to Basel in 2 weeks' time. I'm speaking at the Global Summit of Women. We've decided to have it in Switzerland because they need support. They're so far behind everybody else. So there you are. They may be rich and prosperous, and we go there to study their innovation, but can you believe this? 20% wage gap between men and women? It's just weird. I mean, this is just about treating people on the basis of merit and getting your entire talent pool round the table.
I find this, Andrew, this quite extraordinary, the story. I mean, as May said, you've got this gap around 20%, and last month a survey by the International Labour Organisation put Switzerland bottom of the list in pay rates between men and women in senior roles. One wonders about a nation which in ways is so sophisticated, the home of the Red Cross, Syngenta, Rolex, Tag Heuer. You know, what are we seeing? What are we talking about here?
And the International Labour Organisation, that's where it's based. I
spent a week. That's where I was working.
I spent a week in one of the sector group meetings there. And so, when I read that in the notes that they hadn't got the vote till 1971, that blew me away. I just naturally, everything I had to do there it was all sort of equal rights and equal everything. And I was, I guess I was in meetings all day long, so I never saw anything else. That's outstanding, unbelievable that they're that far behind, quite frankly.
Let me tell you one more story. Supermarkets closed at 5 p.m. They didn't open on the weekends. I mean, this is a society
I experienced that.
which is just stacked against anybody who has to deal with food and the family. I mean, it was unbelievable.
And tourists that get there at 7 o'clock at night on a Sunday.
Really?
Well,
yeah. I couldn't get any food.
It's a very interesting society. Do you know you have to dress up to go out to the supermarket? And we used to arrive in our jandals, our shorts. My husband would wear a yellow T-shirt with lots of sheep in it, which said "Lost in New Zealand." And people would look at him because the men would be in suits and ties. The women would be in suits and high heels. And then there was me.
I want to hear your Swiss stories. I'll read some out tomorrow. Email us, the panel at rnz.co.nz. So you're talking about this last Swiss canton, May, who refused women the right to vote. This is around 1991. Appenzell, I think it was.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Is there any sort of activist element in Switzerland, or what sort of society is it?
Well, they're trying, but as I say, there's this huge juxtaposition. It's got a fantastic standard of living. I mean, they take captains of industry there to study their innovation and how advanced they are. But then on the other hand, they're completely backward when it comes to ensuring that you've got, you're milking the entire talent pool in your population. It's just unacceptable.
Very interesting comments, and what a wonderful panel this afternoon with Andrew Hoggart and May Chen. I thank you very much for being on the show today, and I'm back with you 3:45 tomorrow. See you then. Checkpoint now.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, a white supremacist who compares himself to Hitler's deputy is jailed for nearly 2 years. The Finance Minister wants answers from the ANZ following revelations the departing CEO spent the bank's money on wine and cars. MPI is cracking down on farmers sending sick and diseased animals to the slaughter, but does it go far enough? Willie Jackson weighs in on Oranga Tamariki and the uplifting of Māori babies. And the sideline stoush after a 9-year-old West Coast League player is denied a place in her team because she's too old. And could you still pass the test? 96% of international drivers who sat a New Zealand driving theory quiz failed it.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. A high-profile Māori Labour MP has come out in support of Oranga Tamariki, removing babies from their whānau, but only as a last resort. The Children's Minister has today announced the terms of reference for an internal inquiry into the attempted removal of a 6-day-old Māori baby from Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. Willie Jackson, who chairs Labour's Māori caucus, says what happened there isn't new, and in some cases, like that of the Kahui twins who died in 2006 with traumatic brain injuries, removal is necessary.
In South Auckland, you see cases all the time. You know, go and tell some of the people who I've worked with in South Auckland that the Kahui twins shouldn't have been removed. We see cases all the time out there. The reality is that it's the process that has to be put in place.
Willie Jackson says the Māori caucus recognises things have not gone well for 30 years, but expects things to improve with the changes being implemented at Oranga Tamariki from July the 1st. A self-proclaimed neo-Nazi is appealing against the prison sentence he has been given for distributing the live-stream video of the mosque killings. Philip Arps, who runs Beneficial Insulation, a firm that uses neo-Nazi imagery, was today sentenced in the Christchurch District Court to 21 months in prison. His lawyer, Anselm Williams, told the court it was important to sentence his client for what he had done, not for the views he held.
While Mr Arps holds views which are not necessarily those held by a majority of members of the public, they are views which he is nonetheless entitled to hold and express, so long as he doesn't step over the line and commit a criminal offence.
Anselm Williams says a date has yet to be set for the appeal to be heard. The Prime Minister says no New Zealanders at Camp Taji in Iraq have been injured by a mortar attack nearby. Up to 95 troops are training Iraqi security forces in the complex about 30 kilometres north of Baghdad. Reuters is reporting 2 mortar shells came down in the Iraqi section of the sprawling base. Jacinda Ardern says she understands none of the rockets made it past the perimeter.
The advice I've received is that there have been no New Zealand casualties. I'm also advised that from time to time we do have rockets in the vicinity of Camp Taji, and of course whilst that is not something you ever want to get used to hearing, particularly when it's in the vicinity of New Zealanders who are deployed, that is the reality of the environment that they're working in.
Jacinda Ardern says the attack will have no impact on the New Zealand deployment, which is being gradually reduced to 0 over the next 12 months. Thousands of school children in New South Wales are to be given free breakfasts in an attempt to stop hunger in the classroom. The program, to be funded by the state government, will use rescued food such as fresh produce like fruit, vegetables and bread, as well as some purchased food. The BBC's Phil Mercer reports.
The breakfast clubs will run in partnership with Foodbank, Australia's largest food relief charity. 500 schools in New South Wales will join the scheme, alongside 100 others that already take part. Teachers say it will improve students' ability to concentrate during lessons. It's estimated that 740,000 children, or 17% of the total, live in poverty in Australia, a wealthy country that hasn't been in recession since the early 1990s.
Phil Mercer reporting. One of the men on trial for murdering Abraham Tu'uheava told the police his cousin said they were going to put him to sleep. Mr Tu'uheava was found dead and his wife Yolanda severely injured in a Mangere Street last year. Me Sui Tufui and Fisilau Tapaivalu are on trial in the High Court in Auckland, charged with murder and attempted murder. A third man, Viliami Tani, pleaded guilty to the charges 3 weeks ago. In an interview played to the jury today, Mr Tufui told the police he overheard Tani, known as William, talking to Mr Tapaivalu, known as Fish, on the night of the shooting.
While we were driving, William leant over to Fish and whispered, "That's the guy that's making money off the Como name, and we're going to put him to sleep."
The court has previously heard the killing may have been a hit ordered by the Comanchero gang in Australia. The tourism industry has rubbished findings there's a serious gap in international drivers' knowledge of road rules. Only 7 of 226 overseas drivers quizzed by the University of Otago in Queenstown passed the test. Most had been driving in the country for more than a week. Tourism industry Aotearoa's chief executive Chris Roberts says the research is a waste of time.
I'd describe this as a meaningless piece of so-called research. You could stop New Zealanders in the street and ask them 30 road code questions and the results would be very similar.
Chris Roberts says the number of crashes involving overseas drivers has remained relatively steady over the past decade, even though the number of visitor arrivals has boomed during the same period, and the study only serves to reinforce misconceptions. It's 5:05. Tonga are waiting anxiously on the availability of Cronulla prop Andrew Fifita for Saturday's rugby league test against the Kiwis in Auckland. Fifita's been named to start in the front row pending an NRL judiciary hearing tonight. He's been charged with a dangerous tackle in the wake of Cronulla's match against Canberra at the weekend and could be suspended for 3 games unless his legal team can argue successfully for a downgraded charge. It will be the first encounter between the sides since Tonga upset the Kiwis in the 2017 World Cup. The Black Caps are predicting a lively Edgbaston wicket for their World Cup cricket match against South Africa in Birmingham tomorrow night. Wet weather has kept the pitch under cover for several days, which will provide some added juice for the bowlers. But the poor weather has also meant the Black Caps have only managed to train outside today for the first time in over a week. This will be the first match of the tournament in the Birmingham venue, but batting coach Craig McMillan says they know what to expect, having played a Champions Trophy game against Australia there in 2017.
This is a test ground, so generally it's a pitch that has pace and bounce. And with the pitch being under covers for a number of days, you sort of think that there might be some help for the faster bowlers in terms of either some lateral movement or some swings. But I think it's just a good cricket wicket. You know, seeing a lot of scores here in terms of one-day cricket. There's high-scoring games.
In tonight's game, England play Afghanistan. That's the news.
A bank boss leaves over dodgy spending.
It's tens of thousands of dollars over a period that looks like it runs for the entire time he was CEO.
Some say it's not significant.
It's very easy to be outraged, but at the end of the day, it's possibly something like a couple of trips to the airport.
But farmers are not impressed.
Going around telling farmers at the moment that they're going to have to lift interest rates. They're making all this profit and their CE's busy having a fun time.
Always on the money. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6.
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon today, Australian criminal lawyer turned author Sarah Hopkins, bringing insights from the inside to her new novel on the juvenile justice system. And after 10, music critic Amy Raphael on how the industry's changed, but the way women are regarded hasn't. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Fine today, cloud increasing tomorrow and a few showers developing in the far north before spreading along the east coast later in the day. For Waikato through to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine, frosty overnight. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape. Generally fine weather, but the chance of a few showers in Wellington and Taihape this evening. Areas of cloud tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Waiata Upper, mainly fine, cloud and Waiata Upper with isolated showers, spreading north overnight, clearing Waiata Upper tomorrow evening. For Bulla to Fiordland, fine, frosty overnight, cloud increasing tomorrow, with isolated showers developing about the coast and fjords. For Nelson and eastern South Island, fine with frosts overnight, however a few showers about Banks Peninsula and Stewart Island until tonight. Chatham Islands, showers, possibly heavy, easing this evening, becoming isolated tomorrow. You're with RNZ National, 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. In breaking news, emergency services are currently responding to reports of a 49-year-old man stuck in a cave close to Limestone Track on the west coast. Police were alerted shortly after 3 this afternoon to the report and no indications at this point of injuries. We will bring you up to date with that story throughout the show. But first, the co-chair of Labour's Māori caucus Justice says in some cases babies need to be removed from their whānau, citing the horrific deaths of the Kahui twins as an example where state intervention would have helped. But Willie Jackson says that should only be a last resort in order to keep children safe. The Children's Minister, Tracy Martin, today announced the terms of reference for an internal inquiry into the attempted removal of a 6-day-old Māori baby from Hawke's Bay Hospital. The Children's Commissioner is conducting a wider review of the removal process for Māori babies aged up to 3 months. Here's our political reporter Joe Moyer.
Oranga Tamariki is not ruling out releasing the findings of its internal inquiry into the events leading up to the attempted removal at Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. The terms of reference will cover the time from February, when Oranga Tamariki first became aware the mother was pregnant, to her discharge from hospital on May the 9th. Mr Jackson says what happened in Hawke's Bay isn't new, and in some cases, like that of the Kahui twins, removal is necessary. 3-month-old twins Chris and Crew Kahui died in 2006 with traumatic brain injuries sustained while in the care of whānau. Nobody was ever found guilty of their murder.
In South Auckland, you see cases all the time. Go and tell some of the people who I've worked with in South Auckland that the Kahui twins shouldn't have been removed. We see cases all the time out there. The reality is that it's the process that has to be put in place.
Māori MPs and ministers within the Labour Party have avoided media interviews since a newsroom investigation revealed last week 3 Māori babies a week are being taken from their mothers by the state. It led to iwi leaders calling for a new national approach, and a meeting in Hastings on Sunday involving Tracy Martin, Māori Labour ministers Calvin Davis and Nanaia Mahuta, Ngāti Kahungunu and the Māori Council. Today, Ms Martin met with the Labour Māori caucus, which Mr Jackson described as a candid and honest kōrero. Oranga Tamariki replaced Child, Youth and Family Services in 2017 after a complete overhaul of the government department. Mr Jackson says the necessary changes are still a work in progress.
But as a caucus, we recognise that there's been 30 years where things just haven't gone well, and we've got a new organisation set up, and we expect a lot of changes to happen, and that's going to happen from July the 1st.
Ms Martin says regaining public confidence in Oranga Tamariki is something that has to be earned.
The loss of trust inside Child, Youth and Family and Oranga Tamariki did not happen in the last 2 years. So my job is to rebuild a child protection service to make it trustworthy, and I'm still in the process of doing that.
The Whānau Ora Minister Peeni Henare says the state removing Māori children from their parents is just another example of disproportionate representation in every negative statistic. Mr Henare says Māori faring badly is nothing new.
Well, as a Māori, I'd say since the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, it's been like that.
Ms Martin says the inquiry is expected to be completed by the end of July, but she's mindful that one of the biggest complaints from whānau is that they're being pushed by a Pākehā timeline. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
It is about 12 minutes after 5. Now, that is a difficult issue, and it's a tough decision to make to uplift a child. What's your views on it? Let us know. You can get in touch on 2101, that's text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, and that's checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. If you're just joining us, I'm Lisa Owen, and you're listening to Checkpoint. The beliefs of a white supremacist who has compared himself to Adolf Hitler's deputy were laid bare in a Christchurch court today as he was jailed for spreading footage of the mosque attacks. Philip Arps, who runs Beneficial Insulation, a firm that uses neo-Nazi imagery, was sent to prison for 21 months after admitting 2 charges of distributing objectionable publications. Conan Young was at the Christchurch District Court.
Philip Arps was arrested just a few days after the March 15 mosque shootings and has been kept in solitary confinement in prison ever since. He appeared in court today wearing a prison-issued tracksuit, briefly acknowledging 3 supporters sitting in the public gallery with a smile. It was revealed that as well as forwarding footage of the massacre to 30 people, he asked another person to add crosshairs and a body count to the video to, in his words, lighten it up and make it funnier. Crown lawyer Shivani Dayal said prison was the best place for Arps to stay.
In light of the defendant's extreme ideological outlook, the rigidity of his views and his lack of remorse, and the nature of the offending being secretive and hard to detect, the Crown submits that there is little prospect of rehabilitation and a sentence of home detention is not appropriate.
Arps's lawyer, Anselm Williams, said it was important to sentence his client for what he'd done, not for his views.
While Mr Arps holds views which are not necessarily those held by a majority of members of the public, they are views which he is nonetheless entitled to hold and express, so long as he doesn't step over the line and commit a criminal offence.
It was clear early on in Judge Stephen O'Driscoll's sentencing remarks that the chances of Arps being released from prison today weren't good.
I do not believe that an electronically monitored sentence would achieve the purposes and principles of sentencing. Secondly, while you have pleaded guilty, I do not see any indication of any remorse on your part. Third, the prospects of rehabilitation or you changing your views on religion or race are virtually non-existent.
The judge didn't want to share all of the political statements from Arps contained in the pre-sentencing report, but did talk about the businessman comparing himself to Adolf Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess.
Your offending glorifies and encourages the mass murder carried out under the pretext of religious and racial hatred.
Arps regularly interrupted the judge during the sentencing.
It is clear from all the material before me that you have strong and unrepentant views towards the Muslim community.
Religion and the whole thing.
Please don't interrupt while I'm speaking.
The judge noted that when Arps was asked for his opinion of the video, he said it was, quote, awesome.
When you were asked about the deaths of the victims involved in the attacks, the summary of facts says that you showed little empathy and replied, I could not give a mate.
The judge was only willing to give Arps a small discount for his early guilty plea.
Your actions in distributing the video the day after the attack, when families were still waiting to hear where the family members had been killed, demonstrates particular cruelty on your part and callousness on your part.
It's not the first time Philip Arps has been in front of the courts for hate crimes. In 2016, he was convicted of offensive behaviour after delivering a pig's head to the door of the Al Noor Mosque. A video he posted on social media not long after showed him bragging about his crime and calling for Muslims to be killed. RNZ visited Mr Arps's insulation business today. Nobody was there, but the neo-Nazi imagery that previously appeared on his work vans had been painted over. Arps's lawyer has indicated he will appeal his sentence. Kei Ototahi Aho mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Konanyang tēnei.
Now, hundreds of cows, calves and sheep are being sent to meatworks in an injured, diseased or pregnant state, violating new animal welfare rules and prompting instant fines. Legislation brought in last October allows the Ministry for Primary Industries to fine farmers and transport providers for low-level animal offending rather than having to go through a full prosecution process. Since then, more than 400 offences have been recorded at slaughterhouses. MPI says the fines are working to help bring farmers into line, but animal welfare groups say they don't go far enough. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Cattle with cancer in their eyes, sheep with ingrown horns digging into their face, cows giving birth in slaughterhouse pens, lameness in animals and mastitis are among the hundreds of offences vets have picked up at meatworks over the past 8 months. The breaches now result in instant $500 fines for farmers and transport providers, which MPI's compliance manager Gary Orr says saves a prosecution process and deals with the issue there and then.
All of these things are either preventable, as in the case with pregnant cows, or treatable, and as such none of those animals should be put on the truck until they're treated, or they can be euthanised on the farm if they're untreatable.
Included in the more than 430 fines handed out since October, 228 were beef cattle offences, 98 for dairy cattle, 35 calves and 57 sheep. Gary Moore says in most cases the animals were suffering during the sometimes long trips to the meatworks.
It don't extend the suffering by putting the animal on a truck and having it travel for extended periods of time. If it's so sick that it should be put down, then you don't do it through the works, you should do it on the farm. If you want to get a return on investment for the animal by selling it for meat, then it should be in good condition when it goes on the truck.
But he says in the scheme of things, the numbers are very small, with nearly 2 million bobby calves alone sent to the works last year. That message is echoed by Federated Farmers spokesman Miles Anderson, who says there may have been hundreds of incidents, but not hundreds of farms involved.
The bulk of the fines have been issued for what's called back run, which we're working with the transport industry to reduce down to zero. I guess over the last few years the animals have grown and the transport crates have stayed the same size, so it's just around, particularly with cattle, around what MPI classifies as back rub.
But a spokesperson for the animal advocacy group SAFE, Marianne McDonald, says the welfare breaches are a concerning aspect of farming.
Farmers can end up sending animals to slaughterhouses or being found with those animals in very bad conditions on farms because they sometimes are in a situation where they're finding those animals are not creating profit for them. For instance, cows in the dairy industry, when they stop producing as much milk or they fail to get pregnant, they will then get sent off to the slaughterhouse. I mean, that unfortunately is a part of farming.
And she says an independent animal welfare body is needed to oversee welfare issues like these.
The solution for the problems in the enforcement and regulation of animal welfare is that we need an independent animal welfare body that's got the powers and the funding to be able to effectively monitor and care for animals on farms in New Zealand.
MPI says it expects the number of instant fines for animal welfare breaches to drop as more farmers come into line with the new legislation. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
Let's go to some of your feedback now on the issue of oranga tamariki and so-called uplifts of Māori babies being taken away from their birth mothers and parents. This person says, we are hearing about the Māori babies being taken each week by oranga tamariki. I know there is also other ethnic groups, babies removed as well. Can we please hear these statistics too? Leave that one with us. And May from Littleton has got in touch saying, who would ever choose to be a social worker? They are damned if they do and damned if they don't. We'll have more of your feedback a little later. Now, an epic sideline stoush has broken out over school kids rugby league on the West Coast. Now, this is after the local board banned a star player from her team because she's too old for the grade. The girl plays for the under-9s Runanga team, but is in fact nearly 10. West Coast Rugby League says the parents sought an exemption for her to keep playing in that grade, but it was turned down. And the coach, who is also the girl's father, keeps playing her in the under-9s. Chairman of West Coast Rugby League, Brad Taken, explains.
This was the decision that the board made right at the start of the year, and I believe it's always been that way, that you play in your own age group, and you have to understand, if we just let any parent let their kids play on any grade that they felt their kids could play on, then we'd have mayhem every week.
So what team could she play in?
She has been asked many a times to go and play in the proper age group, which is under 11s.
And is there a local team on offer for her in that age group?
Yes, most definitely, and the parents are well aware of it.
Right. So it appears that it did become a problem at a game recently. You were there. What happened?
Well, we were there. I was there on behalf of the board with two other board members. The week previous, there was some complaints from an opposition team about some foul play and language, etc. And so at a committee meeting, the board decided that they should have someone at the game just to be there and observe, and the school in question played, which she was clearly not allowed to. And then, yes, there was a bit of bit of scuffling and verbal words exchanged between family members and coach and partner towards us as a board.
So just to be clear, Brad, this was the scuffle, as you say, it was over the girl being played, was it?
Initially, myself and a couple of other board members were copping abuse from the daughter's mother, and then her brother got involved, and a member of the public then stepped in to sort of try and calm the situation, and then the scuffle broke out between them two.
So can you describe to me what the nature of the scuffle was? Did people go to the ground? Were punches thrown? What was it like?
There were punches thrown early on, and then a little bit of rolling around on the ground, but not acceptable at any level at any sport.
When punches were thrown, how did the kids react who were there?
Oh, the kids were terrified. Yeah, that was something that kids of that age shouldn't see on the sideline. It was disgusting.
How could you tell they were frightened? What did they do?
Oh, there was kids crying. There was, these are parents of some of the kids, so they didn't want to see that sort of stuff happening. We weren't there to have this sort of thing happen. It was totally out of control and totally unnecessary.
Did you try to stop her playing? Was that part of the issue?
Yes, we were there to, like I said, we were there to enforce the rule that she was not to play.
So I understand that the opposing team had agreed to her being on the field. Was that the case, that they were quite happy for her to play?
I believe so, yeah. And when the decision was made right at the start, that the decision was that she was not to play, that the opposition coaches was not, no part of it were they to agree. It was the ruling that she was too old to play in that grade.
Right, so despite the fact that there was a ruling around this, both teams on the day were happy for this girl to play, but board members intervened and said the rules were the rules and she shouldn't play.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, how good a player is this girl?
She's very good. Very, very good. And from what we've seen and what other people have seen, she is too good to play in that grade.
So is that the issue? She's just too good, rather than her age?
No. Well, she's almost 10, so she should be playing in the under-11s. She's way too good to play in a team against 9-year-olds who are not 9 yet.
Do you think that that team has an unfair advantage as a consequence of continuing to play this player?
Well, yeah, clearly. She scored 2 tries while we were there in the short time she was there. She's a very dominant player. And you would expect that at being almost a year too old to play in that grade.
So, who keeps playing?
We have other kids in other grades who are 2, 3, 7 days too old to play in the same grade, who have to go and play in the under-11s and have done so.
So who keeps playing her from her team or club? Who keeps putting her on the field?
The coach.
And what relationship is the coach to this?
Father.
So her father is the coach and he continues to put her on the field?
That's correct.
So what's happening now in terms of the fisticuffs and this decision, which is being ignored?
I've given my versions of events to school board board, and we will be meeting at some stage this week before Saturday to come up with another outcome. It's like I said earlier, if people aren't going to listen to what we're the governing body of the game, if people are going to go out and make their own decisions on what they should do, then we're just going to get nowhere every week. So this has to stop.
And that's Brad Taken, and we'll be following up on this story and speaking to the girl's father, who, as we mentioned, is also the coach of the team after 6 o'clock. But I'm sure you're going to have some views on this. So the girl is 9 years, 8 months. Is she too old to play in the under-9s league, or is it just kiddies league? So what? Will it hurt anyone? Let us know what you think. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Afghan villagers have abandoned Operation Burnham inquiry, saying they've lost faith in the process. We look back at the life of heiress and fashion icon Gloria Vanderbilt, who has died at the age of 95. And could you still pass a driving theory test? What about you, Nona? Could you? We'll find out. Apparently most international drivers in Queenstown can't. We would love to hear from you on that as well. Text us 2101. But now it is time for the headlines with Susanna.
Labour MP Willie Jackson says in some cases Oranga Tamariki has to remove babies from their whānau, but only as a last resort. The Children's Minister has announced the terms of reference for an inquiry into the attempted removal of a 6-day-old Māori baby from Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. Willie Jackson, who chairs Labour's Māori caucus, says what happened there isn't new, and in some cases, like that of the Kahui twins who died in 2006, removal is necessary. Self-described neo-Nazi Philip Arps will appeal against his prison sentence for distributing the live-stream video of the Christchurch mosque massacre. Arps was sentenced to 21 months in prison at the Christchurch District Court this morning. His lawyer, Anselm Williams, told the court his client should be sentenced for what he had done, not for his views. The Prime Minister says no New Zealanders were injured in a mortar attack near Camp Taji in Iraq. Up to 95 soldiers are training Iraqi security forces in the camp north of Baghdad. Reuters is reporting 2 mortar shells came down in the Iraqi section of the base, but Jacinda Ardern says she understands nothing made it past the perimeter. New Zealand has condemned the recent attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman, but has stopped short of blaming Iran. Both the United States and the UK have accused Iran of being behind the explosions, which Tehran denies. Foreign Minister Winston Peters says the attacks are dramatically raising tensions in the region. The Prime Minister says the government is still trying to find a solution to commercial water bottling. Before the last election, the Labour Party said it wanted to bring in a levy, but the idea did not survive coalition talks. However, the Environment Minister is now investigating a royalty and expects to pass an amendment to the Resource Management Act this term. The emergency services are trying to rescue a man and a dog stuck in a cave near Greymouth. The police received a report just after 3 o'clock today that a 49-year-old man and his dog were in the cave on Limestone Track in Marsden in Grey District. Those are our latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. We're going to business news now, but let's take full advantage of the fact that Susanna and Nona Pelsier are in the studio with me. Honesty, please, Susanna. Would you still pass your theory and your driver's test if you sat the test today?
Didn't it used to be multiple choice?
So
just asking.
So you're saying if it was multiple choice. Nona, what about you?
Absolutely. I know my right from my left, and I know how to read a speedo, where the signal lights are, everything.
Oh, we might need to put this to the test at a later date. Nona,
Well,
you've laid
okay.
down the challenge there. All right, let's get to the business news. So a survey has found that first-time home buyers feel bad about asking the bank of mum and dad for a loan. Well, it's a privilege to have a mum and dad who can help, isn't
Yes,
it?
well, it's true, but, you know, a few of them actually feel badly about it. But not everyone. About a quarter of them actually think they're entitled to this Bank of Mum and Dad's loan to them. And a good number of them don't even think they should be having to pay it back. Other people are aghast at this. About a third disagreed with that attitude. And for mum and dad, you know, more than half would be willing to, you know, front up with some money to help their kids get started on the ladder. And so that's quite interesting too.
Who answered the survey? I'm really curious about what did you say?
Mums and dads,
right,
including first-home buyers as well, in addition, and all together, right? But now, interesting. 55% of mums and dads said that they would be willing to give a loan, but a good number of them had no idea what that would entail in terms of being a guarantor. So there seemed to be a lack of knowledge on both sides
about what their responsibilities would be if their child defaults on their mortgage.
And also, for first-time buyers, they're like, maybe we'd like to do this on our own because we don't really want mum and dad in our business.
But a quarter said they expected it.
Yeah, they were like, Mum and Dad should pay. Well, goodness me.
That is incredibly
just goes
interesting.
To show, doesn't it?
Yeah, attitudes. Did they give you an age of the first-time buyers?
I don't have an age, but it would be, I guess, presumably people who still have a mum and dad. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Slightly younger buyers. All right, and you've got another survey there which has found consumers are feeling a bit downbeat about the future of the economy. Why are they all down and gloomy?
Well, they've been like that for a while, though, haven't they? Only, I guess, things have taken a little bit of a turn. And what's interesting is it's the older consumers, the sort of baby boom generation, that are more downbeat than the younger ones. And that has a lot to do with housing prices because, of course, the younger ones are still trying to work out how to get a loan from mum and dad, whereas the older ones, they have their own house, but now the prices might be dropping, so they're a little worried. Whereas the younger groups are thinking, yay, not only can I get a loan from mum and dad, but the houses are cheaper. So that has a lot to do with it. So much of consumer sentiment is driven around house prices and movements there. So interesting, isn't it?
That and rugby.
And so anyways, look, a lot of fewer people think it's a good time to buy a big ticket item, and fewer people are spending on restaurants and bars and good times. So treating themselves. That's right. There you go.
Okay, so what about a whip around the markets? How's it been looking?
Interesting. The markets themselves are in a bit of a narrow pattern right now because there's a little bit of concern over, again, still these trade talks that are overhanging everything. And then, of course, other uncertainties that are emerging in geopolitical worlds that are far from here, but perhaps in the water somewhere near Iran. Anyhow, the NZX Top 50 Index closed up nearly 0.25% by 21 points to 10,191. There you go. And the New Zealand dollar is trading just a touch under 65 US cents, a touch under 95 Australian, and 51.8 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Palcier there with your business news. Hey, I'm really interested to hear what you think of that. If you're a parent, are you expecting to have to stump up for your kid's first house in some way, shape or form? And if you're the child, are you expecting the Bank of Mum and Dad to come up with something? Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And keeping with the theme of business, the Finance Minister says ANZ has questions to answer following the departure of its CEO after revelations he passed off wine storage and chauffeur-driven cars as business expenses. A review revealed fudged expenses amounting to tens of thousands of dollars during David Hisco's 9 years at the helm of the country's largest bank. Katie Scotcher reports.
As of last month, David Hisco was taking leave for health reasons. But yesterday it was revealed ANZ's board was also concerned about some of his expenses, which amounted to tens of thousands of dollars. ANZ New Zealand Chairman Sir John Key said Mr Hisco was under the impression that spending was authorised, but the problem was he didn't accurately record the expenses. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says the CEO's sudden departure doesn't necessarily raise any broader concerns about the conduct of the banking sector. One question for the government, he says, is whether the Reserve Bank has the necessary powers to be able to deal with conduct more generally, which is part of a current review. Mr Robertson says in Mr Hisco's case, there are those more directly affected.
For me, that's really an issue for the ANZ board and for shareholders. I'm sure there will be ANZ shareholders and staff members who are very disappointed in what they've seen here, but I don't think that necessarily means there's a systemic issue.
But Grant Robertson says there are questions the bank still needs to answer.
Particularly around the question of the disclosure of when this occurred and making sure that the ANZ did fulfil their requirements there. So I know that the Reserve Bank is still talking to them about that incident.
The Finance Minister says the public will be the judge of what has happened at the ANZ and doesn't see the need for any direct government response. So what did the public make of David Hisco's spending? I went to an ANZ branch in Auckland to find out.
They obviously get paid too much, and they're just assuming they can charge for whatever they like.
I was not surprised. People, if they have free access to money, just use it. And how honourable is anyone when they have access to money?
It's disappointing, of course, but you'd like to think that that level of corporate greed hasn't, bled all the way through the system. I tend to think as long as it's been found out, if there's others involved, let's deal with them as well. But I don't think you have to, throw the baby out with the bathwater.
David Hisco, who was paid $3.8 million a year, hasn't commented publicly since his departure. RNZ visited a property connected to Mr Hisco in the affluent Auckland suburb of St Heliers today, but no one answered the door. Sir John Key has also come under fire over the revelations, and today former BNZ chairman Kerry McDonald reignited his call for him to resign as chair. Mr McDonald told Morning Report if the ANZ board was unable to identify problems, that raises serious doubts about its ability to run a bank.
The chairman clearly had no knowledge of what was going on, and it's simply another failure by the ANZ, and some other banks have got their own problems too, to abide by the rules of their banking licences.
The ANZ was censured by the Reserve Bank last month after it was discovered it was failing to properly calculate its risk for 5 years and was ordered to increase the amount of capital it holds. Back at Parliament, National's finance spokesperson Amy Adams says the role of the Reserve Bank should also be closely scrutinised.
There are certainly questions that should be addressed as to how well the Reserve Bank is carrying out its function as a bank regulator. I don't want to prejudge that by getting to a conclusion on it, but I certainly think there are questions that are rightly being asked around the role the RB has as the prudential supervisor.
Last year, the Reserve Bank and Financial Markets Authority held a review into the culture and conduct of local major banks, but didn't find any significant misconduct in the way banks treat their customers. The FMA said in a statement that last year's review identified some gaps in the regulation of conduct at the banks. I tamaki makoto mo te hotaka utiahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
And RNZ has asked the Reserve Bank for a response to Mr Hisco's departure, but the bank has yet to reply. Let's go to a bit of your feedback now from our earlier story about Oranga Tamariki and the inquiries and investigations that are ongoing into the uplifting of Māori babies. This person who didn't want to share their name has got in contact and says, every day I live with the intergenerational effects of a Māori baby uplifted from the hospital, my partner's father. He was placed in a Pākehā foster family, more dysfunctional and abusive than the one he was rescued from. Then into the abusive Borstals and boys' homes. Later, despite his violence against his children, he was a loved father and sorely missed after his suicide. Don't let this continue, this person says. And someone else has got in contact to say, why doesn't Oranga Tamariki give the mother an option to go into care or supervision with her baby? So uplift mother and baby together, put support around them so the mum has a chance to learn how to properly care for baby and perhaps improve her life too. I know in some situations they do put the baby and the mother together in parenting programs. Right, 96% of international drivers who sat a New Zealand driving theory quiz in Queenstown failed the test. Only 7 of the 226 drivers passed the test that includes 30 real theory questions. Most had already been driving in the country for more than a week. The results were revealed in an Otago University report released today, but the researchers come under fire from the tourism industry, which says the number of crashes involving overseas drivers has remained steady, even though visitor arrivals have boomed. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton has more.
Judy Richards has been fighting to tighten rules on foreign drivers for 3 years. Her son Reese died when his motorcycle was struck by a Chinese tourist pulling onto a highway near Hawke's Bay in February 2016.
Foreign drivers who come to New Zealand should sit some form of test before they hire a vehicle, because if they can't read the signs or they can't drive properly, then they're not only a danger to themselves, but they're in danger to the New Zealand public.
Ms Richards says losing a loved one is a devastating blow.
Life is not the same. You think about them day, night, it just doesn't go away. You keep going on, but your life is never the same. You hear them laughing, you can visualise their cuddles, their smiles, their laughter, but you just can't physically be there with them anymore. And I wouldn't wish anyone to go through what this family has gone through.
The international visitors were quizzed in Queenstown in February and March this year. The test contained 30 questions from actual New Zealand driving theory tests. Ms Richards says she wasn't surprised to hear the majority of foreign drivers quizzed on road rules failed. One of the report's authors, Professor Neil Carr, says some concerning insights were revealed about overseas drivers.
The number of people who were, despite having been driving in New Zealand for several days, not confident still of being on the roads in New Zealand. And on the flip side of that, there was the percentage of people who were very confident in their driving in New Zealand but failed the theory test.
Tourism Industry Aotearoa Chief Executive Chris Roberts says the research doesn't show the true picture and only serves to further stigmatise international drivers.
What matters is their competency on the road, not whether put 30 questions in front of them on the street side that they can answer 28 out of 30. I mean, really, this piece of research was a complete waste of time. They could have done exactly the same piece of research for New Zealanders and got the same result.
According to government figures, 7% of fatal crashes between 2013 and 2017 involved an overseas driver, but it doesn't mean they were necessarily at fault. Mr Roberts says the number of crashes involving overseas drivers has remained relatively steady over the last decade, despite visitor arrivals booming during the same period.
Well, information is put out there to reach people before they come to New Zealand. They get more information when they're hiring a car. We don't necessarily have the ability to reach them if they're buying a vehicle when they get to New Zealand. But at every stage of their journey, there is information available to them about driving in New Zealand.
Our reporter Anand Zaki hit the streets of Christchurch to test local drivers on road code questions, and not everyone passed.
If your vehicle breaks down on a motorway, you should A, walk to get help, B, wave down a passing vehicle, C, lift up the bonnet and boot off your vehicle, or D, push your vehicle to the nearest off-ramp.
D.
It's C. You're driving in a 100k speed area and you see an accident sign. What speed must you slow down to? 50, 40, 30 or 20?
Yeah, I'd say I'd go down to say at least 20.
Again, I think it's 30. It's 20.
Rental Vehicle Association President James Dalglish says the industry is working hard to keep visitors and New Zealanders safe on our roads.
There's certainly a great number of initiatives in place, from things like a basic questionnaire everybody gets asked, right through to road code and material shared in the vehicles, right through to video assets in branches. I think industry's done a good bunch of things. There's a good few things in the toolkit, and I still think there's more that can be done, but we're certainly heading in the right direction.
Transport Agency Southern Regional Relationships Director Jim Harland says the university study wouldn't show how drivers would react on the road.
Even if they got the theory right, it wasn't going to help them make better decisions. So I think what it's saying to me is humans, we do make mistakes, and even if we've been trained in another country, we seem to make the same sort of mistakes when driving on the New Zealand network.
The tourism industry, NZTA and Professor Neil Carr says further research into international and domestic drivers is needed. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tane.
It is about 12 minutes to 6 now. We were just having a chat while that story was on. Calvin, our director, has gone online to see if he can pass the theory of the driver's licence test. He is through, how many questions so far, Calvin? About 28, I think. He's gone through 28 questions online. He's got 5 wrong, and we think that is potentially a fail. We're waiting till he gets to the end. There are 35 questions. I'm wondering, would you pass the theory test now? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz, or you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And once Calvin has finished the test, we will tell you what his final score is and also what vehicle he drives so you can avoid him at all costs. Now, the Afghan villagers who've for years been seeking answers about what happened during Operation Burnham have pulled out of the inquiry, saying they've lost faith in the process. The lawyers representing former residents of Kakudaidad and Nayak made the announcement at a press conference in Auckland. The inquiry is investigating allegations that 6 civilians were killed in Afghanistan during a New Zealand-led operation in 2010. Matthew Tunison reports.
Rodney Harrison QC says the 2 Afghan villages are now completely deserted and those affected are scattered around the country, unable to find meaningful work. They've received no assistance from New Zealand and feel they have been excluded from the inquiry. Mr Harrison says they feel completely disillusioned.
They have lost all confidence in the inquiry by reason of its progressive rulings. These include the ruling that they will not participate in a right to life inquiry, which would have given our clients a front and centre position in the inquiry. They will not permit access to key information such as the disputed videotape of the incident.
Mr Harrison says they're also unhappy with the ruling that some Defence Force witnesses have been allowed to give evidence behind closed doors. The inquiry is investigating allegations in the book Hit and Run that 6 civilians were killed in Afghanistan during a New Zealand-led operation in 2010 and the military covered up what happened. The Defence Force disputes the claims, saying secret drone footage disproves them. Mr Harrison says that without the villagers taking part, the inquiry will no longer have representation from the victims of Operation Burnham.
It's been almost 9 years since Operation Burnham. Our clients' villages were destroyed as well as the loss of life and injury. So for 9 years now, they've been hoping for some redress from New Zealand. They put their faith in the inquiry, but they've just been worn down by the process.
Human rights lawyer Deborah Manning says the Afghan villagers have always had very low trust and confidence in the New Zealand authorities. She says it's very painful to them that what happened has never been acknowledged, including the death of a 3-year-old girl called Fatima.
One of the elements of the obligation on the New Zealand government is for the New Zealand government to take the initiative, the responsibility for the investigation. It's not for the next of kin, for the families, for the victims to be responsible, to bang on every door and plead for justice. And so that is where they have really felt let down. They are exhausted and worn down.
Ms Manning read out some of the comments that were made by the villagers to her.
They say things such as, we can't trust the process anymore, we are very tired, we are very poor people, we lost everything. We lost our people, our close family were killed, wounded and harmed, and we've been waiting, we've been trying to go through this process and we don't trust this process.
The Attorney General, David Parker, says he continues to have confidence in the inquiry.
I've got absolute trust in the people that are running the inquiry. I think they're going to get to the bottom of the truth of the matter. Whether people want to cooperate with the inquiry or not is a matter for them. It's not a matter within my control.
A statement from the inquiry into Operation Burnham says while the withdrawal of the villagers is disappointing, it does not significantly impact the inquiry's work. It says it stands by the processes it has adopted, which aim to strike a balance between safeguarding classified information and the identity of all witnesses. The Human Rights Foundation today set up a Give a Little page to raise funds for the villagers, with about $1,700 donated so far. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunison Tēnei.
Overseas now, there are calls for a full investigation into the death of Egypt's former president, Mohamed Morsi, who died after collapsing in court in Cairo. The 67-year-old, who was a top figure in the now banned Muslim Brotherhood, was attending a hearing to answer charges of espionage. He's been held in solitary confinement in prison since he was ousted by the Egyptian army a year after his election in 2012. This report from the BBC's Orla Guerin.
This is how State TV announced the death of Mohamed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. No fanfare, no tributes, no mention that he was Egypt's first democratically elected president. In recent years, a prisoner in the dock in a soundproof cage, it was in court today that he spoke his last words, collapsing and dying soon afterwards. Condolences were offered by the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, a fellow Islamist and close ally.
Demokrasiyi bir tarafa koyarak
May Allah grant rest to the martyr's soul, he said. History won't forget the tyrants who led to his death by jailing him and threatening him with execution. Back in June 2012, when Mohamed Morsi won the presidency, there was hope in the air for many in Egypt. But fast forward a year and mass crowds were demanding his removal, branding him autocratic and inept. The army happy to oblige under Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who went on to become president himself. Then began the first of many trials, show trials, according to critics. Well, I witnessed Mohamed Morsi's first appearance in court in November 2013. Since then, he's been held in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, according to MPs who investigated his detention. They warned last year that his conditions in prison, including a lack of medical care, could lead to his premature death. Now they believe it has.
There needs to be an independent international investigation into the circumstance of his death. What we found were, on a balance of probabilities, his conditions of detention were so inhuman and so degrading they could actually sustain a charge of torture.
Tonight, heavy security outside the prison complex where Mohamed Morsi was incarcerated. A spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood claimed his death was first-degree murder. The authorities will deny that. For many Egyptians, he's just a footnote to history. But others will look back at a brief moment when Morsi was a symbol of hope and democracy.
Orla Guerin reporting there from Cairo. Now, the mystery of who created a 1960s pop culture time capsule uncovered in a New Plymouth cottage last week has been revealed. The McIsaac sisters, Anne and Peggy, travelled from Stratford and Auckland respectively today to be reunited with their childhood home and the wall-to-wall posters they put up as kids. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
When the cottage's current owner, Katie Pitwood, began removing Jib in a bedroom in the Lemon Street property, staring back at her were wall-to-wall posters of the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Kinks, and many more obscure stars of yesteryear. Realising how unique the discovery was, Miss Pitwood went public to try and track down who had put the posters up. And the answer didn't lie far away. Lorraine McDonald used to live across the road, and her daughter lives there now.
My husband said to me, oh, see that house in Lemon Street, he said, with all those posters, and I said, oh, I don't care. And then my daughter, who lives in our house, she rang us and said, that was Peggy and Anne's house. So,
and you made the connection?
Yeah, and Barb, my sister, keeps in touch with Peggy all the time, so that's how it all happened.
Miss McDonald supplied the posters.
I worked in a bookshop, and at the end of each month you rip the covers off and, you know, sent away the returns. So brought them home and gave them to Peg. We lived here and they lived there.
She remembers that Peggy had a penchant for the Beatles. Anne McIsaac said she had a room out the back and the posters were Peggy's handiwork. But it's Dad that gets the credit for covering them over.
Yeah, my dad, he jibbed the rooms, yeah, and obviously just left them behind.
Did he talk to you guys about that, or?
No, well, he never said anything to me about it, no.
Ahead of the sisters' arrival, Katie Pitwood said tracking them down had just been incredible.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't wait to meet them. One of the sisters had got the old photo albums out and had found some photographs of the house from when they lived there, so I'm quite excited to see those as well.
Miss Pitwood said she'd had a lot of approaches for the actual posters and had found a new home for them too.
Parachute Music in Auckland contacted me and said they would love to look after the posters, and they've got temperature control rooms and stuff because it's a music studio, and these studios look absolutely incredible. So they're sending someone down in the weekend to come and remove them all and take them away and preserve them.
The creative director at Parachute, Chris de Jong, was rapt to get her hands on them.
When we saw it first, I was like, oh gosh, that's so cool. And then I woke up the next morning and I thought, this is crazy, but I think we need to contact Katie. So I spoke to my husband, who's our CEO, and he was like, it's a daft idea, but let's do it. So then we just approached Katie and talked to her. And you know, I used to have a David Cassidy clubhouse when I was 13 under the stairs in my house, and so it took me right back.
Mr. Zhang says Parachute will be able to display the posters for all the artists who come and go to enjoy. The timing is perfect for Katie too, who needs to get on with those renos.
It's amazing. I'm just so glad someone wants to care for them, because I'm a bit of a hoarder and a bit of a collector, and I would love to have kept them, but I had to be a bit realistic about it and push on with the renovations because we move in 4 weeks, and I sort of got to the point I needed them gone.
Anne says the sisters also couldn't be happier.
I think that's great. Yeah, if somebody wants to hang on to them, good. Yeah. You'll never see them again, will you? You know.
A team from Parachute Studios will head to New Plymouth at the weekend to remove the posters. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
A quick bit of feedback before the news on the Oranga Tamariki story. Angus, a former SIF social worker, has got in contact and said uplifting of any child, Māori or Pākehā, is distressing for all involved, but so is the degree of violence inflicted on New Zealand children. Good point.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. A high-profile Māori Labour MP has come out in support of Oranga Tamariki removing babies from their whānau, but only as a last resort. The Children's Minister, Tracy Martin, has today announced the terms of reference for an internal inquiry into the attempted removal of a 6-day-old Māori baby from Hawke's Bay Hospital last month. Willie Jackson, who chairs Labour's Māori caucus, says what happened there isn't new, and in some cases removal is necessary. He says people in South Auckland would be unlikely to disagree that the Kahui twins, who died in 2006 of traumatic brain injuries, should have been taken into care earlier. Meanwhile, Ms Martin says work is still needed to make Oranga Tamariki worthy of trust and public confidence.
The loss of trust inside child, youth and family and Oranga Tamariki did not happen in the last 2 years. So my job is to rebuild a child protection service to make it trustworthy, and I'm still in the process of doing that.
Tracy Martin. Oranga Tamariki's inquiry is expected to be completed by the end of next month. At this stage, the agency has not ruled out publicly releasing the findings. New Zealand has condemned the recent attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman, but has stopped short of blaming Iran. Both the United States and Britain have accused Iran of being behind the explosions, which Tehran vehemently denies. The Foreign Minister Winston Peters says the attacks have dramatically raised tensions in the region and could have wider consequences. He says any misstep or miscalculation could lead to a serious escalation. Mr. Peters says New Zealand calls on all parties to exercise caution, restraint and common sense. The Prime Minister says the government has not given up finding a solution to commercial water bottling. Before the last election, the Labour Party said it wanted to introduce a levy on such activity, but the idea did not survive coalition talks. Jacinda Ardern says solutions are still being sought.
The issue we have is that if we do want to tackle that for offshore water bottlers, we have to treat our domestic water bottlers in the same way because of our trade obligations. That has made finding a solution trickier, but it's something we're working on nonetheless.
Jacinda Ardern says New Zealanders don't like the fact that for very little benefit, a precious resource is being bottled and sent offshore. The Operation Burnham inquiry says the withdrawal of Afghan villagers will not significantly affect its work. The inquiry is investigating allegations that 6 civilians were killed in Afghanistan during a New Zealand-led operation in 2010 and that the military covered it up. Matthew Tunison reports.
Lawyers representing the villagers today announced they will play no more part in the inquiry, saying they've lost faith in the process. Human rights lawyer Deborah Manning says it's very painful to them that the New Zealand authorities have never acknowledged what happened, including the death of a 3-year-old girl called Fatima. A statement from the inquiry into Operation Burnham says while it's disappointing, the withdrawal of the villagers does not significantly impact its work. It says the inquiry has a wide range of information and sources available to it, including hit-and-run authors John Stevenson and Nikki Hager, and the affidavit affidavits of 3 villagers. This is Matthew Tunison.
The Ministry for Primary Industries has handed out more than 400 instant fines to farmers and transport providers for sending sick and injured animals to meatworks. The $500 fines were introduced last October for low-level animal offending to avoid a full prosecution process. Vets stationed at meatworks have recorded instances of cattle with cancer in their eyes, sheep with ingrown horns digging into their faces, and cows giving birth in slaughterhouse pens. The Ministry's acting compliance manager, Gary Orr, says such breaches are unacceptable.
All of these things are either preventable, as in the case with pregnant cows, or treatable, and as such, none of those animals should be put on the truck until they're treated, or they can be euthanised on the farm if they're untreatable.
Gary Orr says he expects the number of fines issued to drop as more farmers come into line with the new rules. Speed limits will be cut on 47 Kapiti Coast roads to make them safer. The District Council has voted for the changes after hearing from more than 200 submitters. The speed limit in the Raumati and Paikakariki village centres will now be 30 kilometres an hour. On about 30 rural roads, the limit will be reduced from between 70 to 100 kilometres an hour to 60. The council's infrastructure manager, Sean Mallon, says residents asked for the changes. Emergency services say they don't know how long it will take to free a man and a dog from a South Island cave. The 49-year-old and his dog are currently stuck inside the cave just off the limestone track in Marsden in the Grey District. A spokesperson for Fire and Emergency, Mo Barbara, says rescue teams are working hard to free the pair.
At this stage, we have cave rescue on the scene and setting up equipment, and Fire and Emergency are assisting with the setting up, and at this stage we have no indication of time how long this is going to take.
Mo Barbara says there is no indication of any injuries. It's 6:05. The former Wellington Phoenix star Roy Krishna says he has signed a one-year deal with the Indian football side ATK. The A-League's Player of the Season in 2019 announced last month he wouldn't be re-signing with the Phoenix. Krishna spent 5.5 seasons with the club and is its all-time leading scorer with 51 goals. The Kiwis Rugby League coach Michael Maguire says Benji Marshall's game has gone through an evolution. The 34-year-old is set to return to the New Zealand League when he takes the field against Tonga in Auckland on Saturday. It will be his first test in 7 years and just the second time he'll play alongside Sean Johnson. Maguire believes Marshall will be the perfect foil for Johnson.
Benji's changed his game a little bit over the last 12 months, I guess. He's been able to really learn how to direct a game and follow plans and those sorts of things. Not to say that he wasn't doing that, but he's at a higher level now. So I think Sean will be able to sort of play off the back of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that connection comes throughout the week.
Meanwhile, Tonga are anxiously awaiting news on star prop Andrew Fifita. At an NRL judiciary hearing tonight, he could be suspended for 3 games and ruled out of the test. The New Zealand men's softball team play unbeaten Japan at the World Champs in Prague tonight. New Zealand have 3 wins and a loss at the tournament. 7 uncapped players have been named in the Black Fern squad for next month's Rugby Super Series in San Diego. A 30-strong squad has been named for the competition, which includes tests against Canada, the United States, France and England. And the Netball Premiership winners, Central Pulse, have re-signed coach Yvette McCausland-Dury for a 4th season. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, being young, gifted and an Indigenous American. Aussies doing Mongolian throat song, and this week's after dinner speaker, our toxicologist Leo Shep, has another crack at mushrooms, this time the magic ones. I wonder what he thinks of the current Silicon Valley fad to microdose on psilocybin. He also has some advice on mushrooms you shouldn't take with alcohol. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine today, cloud increasing tomorrow. A few showers developing in the far north before spreading along the east coast later in the day. Waikato to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui, fine and frosty overnight. Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape, generally fine, a chance of a few showers in Wellington and Taihape this evening, areas of cloud tomorrow morning. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, mainly fine, cloud in Wairarapa with isolated showers, spreading north overnight, clearing Wairarapa tomorrow evening. For Bulla to Fiordland, fine, frosty overnight, cloud increasing tomorrow, isolated showers developing about the coast and fjords. Nelson and Eastern South Island, fine, frost overnight, however a few showers about Banks Peninsula and Stewart Island until tonight. Chatham Islands, showers possibly heavy, easing this afternoon, then becoming isolated tomorrow. You're with RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Got the wrong guy, I'm innocent. Those are the words of Mesui Tufui, one of the men accused of murdering Abraham Tuuhiava and trying to murder his wife, Yolanda Tuuhiava, in Mangere last year. Mr Tufui is on trial alongside his cousin, Fisilau Tapaivalu, in the High Court at Auckland. Both men deny any role in the killing, but say they were with Viliami Tani, who has admitted the charges on the night in question. Our court reporter, Annika Smith, has been following the case and she filed this report.
Abraham Tuuhiava's body was found on Greenwood Road in the early morning of May the 1st last year. Not far away was his wife, Yolanda, who'd been shot twice in the head and left for dead, but managed to survive. She later identified Mesui Tufui as one of the gunmen through a photograph. The 26-year-old was brought into the Manukau police station for questioning 10 days later. He told Detective Regan Tamahiri he was innocent.
I have nothing to do with it. I just didn't know what to say, but I'm speechless. I was never there.
Mr Tufui told the detective he knew of the deceased man Abraham from his childhood in Otahuhu. His co-defendant and cousin, Fisilau Tapaivalu, is nicknamed Fish. He said he'd spent a lot of time with Mr Tapaivalu, who was working his way into the Comancheros through patched member Viliami Tani, known as William. Tani, also a cousin, pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder 3 weeks ago. Mr Tufui told Detective Tamahiri all three of them met up in the early evening of the 30th of April, roughly 6 hours before the shooting. This is the detective reading Mr Tufui's statement in a police video.
William and Fish picked me up from my home address in Mangere. They were in a black BMW. I thought we were just going to go for a cruise, which means driving around having a catch-up.
Mr Tufui said they went to the Manukau McDonald's, where Tane or William got out of the car to meet Abraham Tuuhiava. He said he didn't realise it was Abraham at the time because he hadn't seen him in years. As they drove away, Mr Tufui said Tane called someone on Snapchat.
I heard William say, "What's the go with the nomads?" From the part that I did hear, I picked up that the person on the other end of the phone had an Australian accent. William then responded by saying, "All good, we're going to see now."
Later that night, the three cousins, Mr Tufui, Mr Tapaivalu and Tane, parked up at Bucklands Beach to meet another Comancheros member. Mr Tufui said Tane walked off and returned 5 minutes later.
When he got back into the car, William looked at Fish and said, "Yeah, green light." He said, "Yeah, tonight." We then began driving from Bucklands Beach to my house. While we were driving, William leant over to Fish and whispered, "That's the guy that's making money off the Como name, and we're going to put him to sleep."
Mr Tufui said he wasn't sure if he was supposed to hear this, but assumed they were talking about Abraham Tuuhiava.
I heard William saying to Fish, he thinks he's coming to get a gram or a key, something like that. I thought key was a kilo, and so that made me think that they were going to lure him in with a drug deal.
The court has previously heard the killing may be a hit ordered by the Comanchero gang in Australia. Mr Tufui said he was dropped home and didn't know what happened until he saw stories the next day. He repeatedly told Detective Tamahiri he had nothing to do with the killing. At one point during the recorded interview, the detective left the room for a break. When he's out of the room, Mr Tufui turns to the camera and says, "Got the wrong guy, I'm innocent." His defence is that it's a case of mistaken identity. Mr Tufui's lawyer, Paul Borich QC, cross-examined Detective Tamahiri today and questioned the way police interviewed his client. He said at one point another officer, Detective Steve Anderson, entered the room and they both asked questions and stared at the accused for long periods of time. The detective agreed the interviewing style had changed, but said it wasn't planned that way. Co-accused Fesilao Tapaivalu says he was there that night but never got out of the car. The Crown has now closed its case. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith-Aho.
Road users are pleading with the Transport Agency to fast-track safety improvements on a state highway described by the AA as the most dangerous in the Wellington region. State Highway 58, also known as Haywards Hill, connects the Hutt Valley to Porirua. It was supposed to have a raft of safety upgrades finished by the time Transmission Gully opens next year, but funding isn't available for the bulk of them and they've been delayed. Emma Hatton reports.
Over the past decade, there have been over 200 crashes, causing 4 deaths and 17 serious injuries on the section of road that joins State Highway 2 and the Pawatahanui roundabout. It's a challenging drive, narrow with tight, difficult curves and many side roads. The AA's Wellington District Council Chair, Geordie Casson, told the Transport Committee this morning it beggared belief that planned improvements to the road would be delayed until after Transmission Gully is up and running.
We have made numerous submissions on State Highway 58. We have met with the agency to talk about this on many occasions, seeking improvements to safety on the road. Yet today, it remains the most dangerous state highway in the Wellington region.
The package of improvements included straightening dangerous curves, improving intersections, installing median barriers, and lowering the speed limit. Mr Casson says the AA supported the lowering of the speed limit from 100 to 80 kilometres per hour, which happened last year, but was under the impression that the rest of the work would closely follow. Ken McAdam has lived on Flighties Road off State Highway 58 on the Porirua side for 20 years. He says without all the changes happening at once, the lower speed limit has actually made it more dangerous to pull out of his road because cars follow each other more closely and there's less gaps in the traffic.
I do it myself and I don't like it, but if you've got to be somewhere and you're going out somewhere and all it takes is for that risk to be the wrong risk and there's drastic results. Now, I've seen a couple within the last year, but they've both been cars that have had to be put on tow trucks to take away. They're not little crashes.
He wants roundabouts at the 2 main intersections where traffic struggles to get out of, something that was in the original plan, but says if that's not possible, there must be other quicker solutions.
I don't know what can be done. I mean, we sit in rooms with minds that are supposedly far greater than mine on roading issues, and I would expect someone to be able to come up with a solution that at least covers the safety issues in an interim.
He's concerned that when Transmission Gully opens and an estimated 8,000 more cars use the road every day, it will be almost impossible to get out of his road, and it's only a matter of time before someone is killed. The Transport Agency's Wellington manager, Mark Owen, was at the meeting and heard these concerns. However, he says the original plan faced challenges.
The challenge always was the timing of Transmission Gully, and it's a matter of doing what's appropriate. So we had an ambition to make all the safety improvements, but with the challenges around land acquisition and consenting, often they can take longer than predicted, and that's one of the challenges we've got on this section of highway.
Some work on the Hutt Valley side of the hill has been done, and more has been allocated funding. However, Ken McAdam's roundabouts are still some way off. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
And this would be an appropriate time to update you on our director, Calvin, who was skiting about the fact that he could still pass his driving theory test. Now, this is on the back of a survey that found 96% of international drivers who sat the theory test in a quiz in Queenstown failed the test. Well, Calvin has joined their ranks. He failed too. 28 questions right out of a total of 35 on the online driver's theory test. You have to get a minimum of 32 to pass, and he only managed 80%. One of the questions that tripped him up, how far can your load extend either side of the centre line of your vehicle? How far can your load extend either side of the centre line of your vehicle? Who knows that? Well, Calvin said it was 1 metre. He was wrong. It's 1.275. He drives a Toyota. You've been warned. Let's go offshore now. Beijing is standing behind the embattled Hong Kong leader, Carrie Lam, despite continuing protests and calls for her resignation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says the government will always support her and efforts to govern Hong Kong according to law. But protesters are promising to keep up the pressure and have been heartened by the release from prison of a well-known pro-democracy activist, Joshua Wong. The BBC's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reports.
Joshua Wong was mobbed by supporters and the media as he walked free after 31 days in jail. Many here see this young man as Hong Kong's first political prisoner. His release came less than a day after hundreds of thousands took to the streets here demanding the withdrawal of a controversial extradition bill. But now Joshua Wong told me axing the bill will not be enough. He says Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam, must also go.
She needs to pay the price. She needs to step down. If she do not step down, I believe there will be more than 1 million of Hong Kong citizens come to the street again.
This afternoon, the Chinese government in Beijing expressed its firm support for Mrs. Lam. But here in Hong Kong, even pro-government lawmakers like Felix Chung are now openly blaming her for the current mess.
Now she created a problem. If she leaves, who's going to come and take up the problems? If it was me, I don't want to touch it. Okay, let her clear that up first.
In the space of 1 week, Hong Kong has been rocked by 3 of the biggest protests the territory has ever seen. Time may now be running out for Hong Kong's embattled chief executive.
And that was Rupert Wingfield Hayes in Hong Kong. The father of a schoolgirl rugby league player banned from her team because she's too old believes it's pretty much game over for his girl at the age of 9 years, 11 months. An abusive kerfuffle erupted when punches were thrown at a game last week after Royce Green, who was also the coach, continued to play his daughter in the under-9s team, even though she is closer to 10 years old. She's been denied an exemption to continue in the under-9s grade. Mr Green says his daughter, who wears glasses, is too scared to play in the next grade up after only a year in the game.
The tackling skills are still, they're average, but she gets in and she tries. She's not a Sonny Bill Williams or anything like that. She just gets out there and does it. She doesn't stand out amongst them all. She just does her job,
She scored a couple of tries last game, didn't she?
Yeah, she scored one, yep.
Yeah. So do you think it's fair that she stays in that grade when other kids have to move up and move on?
Yeah, I do. Well, there is no other grade in our club for her to go into. And she will not go up because of her anxiety. She won't go into... We've tried this. We tried to put her into rugby under 10s. And we turned up the training and she just wouldn't get out of the car. She just had a panic attack down there. Like, I tell you, it was a struggle to get her to put the boots on for this team. And I feel that she'll go up next year, but she's not hurting anyone. She's not doing any damage to anyone. She just goes out there and enjoys herself. That's what it's about, enjoyment and getting the kids involved.
West Coast Rugby League say that, it is a safety concern because she's considerably older than the other members of the team and the teams that she'll be playing. And if she should hurt another player accidentally, then that's a major issue for them.
Yeah, well, so far she's played 5 games and she hasn't hurt a soul. And she's not going to because she's not rough, But it's league though, isn't it? It's a game. You can't always control everything that happens on the field. So it's a possibility, isn't it? Possibility she could get hurt by a younger kid also, It's just the way it is. Yeah, you're right. But I feel that she should stay in this level till next year, till she builds up her confidence.
Yeah, so they won't allow it. I mean, they're sticking pretty firm to this. They say the rules are the rules. So what happens then?
Well, I think it's more of a grudge match between me. I think it's a personal attack. Like a lot of these committee members, they don't actually physically like me. And as I've heard around the street, it's not about Milana, it's about me.
So do you think there's a grudge against you? Is that what you're saying? This is what it's all about?
Yes. Yeah. More of that than so her.
Why would they have a grudge against you?
I don't know. Just the way I am, probably.
But, okay, so you are the coach as well as her father. Are you sure you just don't want to keep her in your team because she's a really good player?
No, I've got many good players in my team. The team's made up of talent. And she's just in there having fun. I've got some really, really, really good players. And they're of age, of course. For her, it's just convenient, it's easy, and I'm just getting used to it because of the way she is.
Okay, so there was a recent game where things got, a bit rough, and I don't mean in the game, I mean on the sidelines. What happened?
Well, the West Coast Schoolboy Committee turned up with 3 observers to watch the game. Not just our game, they reckon all games, but they turned up on our game. I spoke to the coach to the other team, and he was happy enough to play against Milan. He said, no, and the parents were all happy. No, we're all sweet. They approached him and told him, no, she cannot play. They didn't come to me, they went to him. And then we had a discussion, and we both come to the decision we're going to play, you know. And then 5 minutes into the game, they threatened to cancel the whole game because she was playing. And so I took her off. You know, there's 16 or 19 other players here, and I'm not going to sacrifice 19 players for one. So I took her off. Then she started to, you know, get a bit sad about that. So I put her back out there. I thought, no, what? You know, this is a kid's game. I can't do this to her. And next thing, a parent came over and told me, you've got to take her off. They're going to cancel the game. And I took her off the game. I thought, no, I can't. You know, I've tried. And then she broke down, started crying. And her mother got a bit upset. And she went over and said to them, look what you've done, you made your daughter cry. And, you know, whatever happened, I wasn't there at the time, but...
Royce, was she abusive? Because that's the allegation. Was she abusive to the officials?
I don't recall that because I wasn't there at the time.
What has she told you? Did she use some choice words?
I don't actually know. Because I was on the other side of the field. They were on the other side. I couldn't hear what she was saying. So it's word of mouth. And another person witnessed a couple of these people, like, being quite smart towards my partner, and he commented as well that things got escalated out of control, and I went over there, told them to back off because of it's a kid's game, whatnot. And I turned around and there was a couple of people fighting, but it wasn't really much of a fight. But to kids, it was, you know, it would have been terrible and scary.
Who was fighting who? Who was fighting who?
Just a couple of people on the sideline, really. You know.
So, what, people from opposing points of view? Is that
No, they, nothing to do with me. They were just because of one was telling the other one to be quiet, to stop talking to the others like that, and got out of control. I was walking away to try to get the game, you know, get things sorted. And
a couple of people ended up on the ground.
Yeah, it was more of a rolling around, but still, it was scary for the kids. It was, you know, it was uncalled for, so we broke it up. There was no blood, there was no scratches. It was just, you know, more of a scuffle than anything else. But
is this worth it? I mean, this is school kid rugby league, and you've got some fully formed adults rolling around on the sideline in a stoush, throwing punches and exchanging harsh words. Is this really worth it?
Well, I agree with you there. It's not really worth it that way.
And you're not prepared to put her in another club to play just one grade up?
Not at this minute. She would not do it. I mean, I'd try to get her to go, but she will not do it.
And that was Royce Green, and he is the coach of Runanga under-9 team on the West Coast, and his daughter is one of those players, but she's over the age of 9, as you heard, and can no longer play in that grade. It is 26 minutes after 6, and we've got some good news, actually. Emergency services say a man and a dog who were both trapped in a cave on the South Island's West Coast have been freed, so that's great news. She was 95 years old, but ask anyone close to her and they'll tell you she was the youngest person they knew, the coolest and most modern. That's how CNN correspondent Anderson Cooper has described his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, who died at the age of 95 after suffering from advanced stomach cancer. She was born into one of the richest families in US history, but became the subject of a bitter and very public custody battle, and she was dubbed the poor little rich girl. The heiress went on to become an artist and fashion designer. With more, here's the BBC's Chris Buckler.
Gloria Vanderbilt was born into enormous wealth and almost straight into the headlines. Before she was 2 years old, her father died and her mother took her to Europe, prompting a custody battle in which Gloria was portrayed as the poor little rich girl. Her aunt said her mother was using her trust fund to pay for a freewheeling, lavish lifestyle. The court case made the papers with scandalous accusations and character witnesses from high society. In the end, she was taken from her mother, and Gloria Vanderbilt said that started a long quest for love and approval. There were romances with Frank Sinatra, Marlon Brando and Howard Hughes. and marriages to, among others, the director Sidney Lumet and the writer Wyatt Cooper.
I'm always in love, and I think everybody should always be in love. And if it's not, of course, a person is ideal. But if not, you have to have joy in looking at a flower and the sun.
She was at various times an actress, an author and a fashion designer. In the 1970s, tight-fitting jeans, which bore her name and signature, were a must-have for many style-conscious women.
They're the upper stratas, they're the jeans with a social status. Girls with private jets and with fancy pets think they're tops.
But amid all the success, there was a tragedy, which Gloria Vanderbilt said stripped her bare. In 1988, her son Carter threw himself from the family's 14th floor apartment in New York in front of her. Another of her sons, the CNN journalist Anderson Cooper, reflected on the effect of his death in an HBO documentary he made with his mother.
Some people are sucked under by tragedy and loss, and it destroys them, and some people it propels them forward. And I think it certainly has my mom, and it certainly has with me.
In a statement announcing her death, Anderson Cooper said his mother was 95 years old, but that anyone close to her would have told you that Gloria Vanderbilt was the youngest, coolest, most modern person they knew.
Chris Buckler reporting there. Time for one last piece of feedback. This is on foreign overseas tourists driving on our roads. This person says, I met a lovely Texan lady on a flight to Oz a few weeks back. She regaled me with stories of her confusion with roundabouts. She'd never seen one before. Before doing some dodgy manoeuvres, she ended up calling Uber and told the driver she just wanted to follow them. She says she wouldn't have booked a rental if she knew that she would be so uncomfortable and confused. See you again.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Labour MP Willie Jackson says he supports Oranga Tamariki sometimes having to take babies from their whānau, but only as a last resort. The government's Operation Burnham inquiry does not expect the withdrawal of Afghan villagers to have a significant effect on its work. Christchurch businessman Philip Arps is appealing his prison sentence for distributing the live stream video of the mosque massacre. And the Green Party still wants a moratorium on commercial water bottling, but in the meantime it wants the government to introduce a levy. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
It's hard to ever imagine that the very rigid authoritarian style of political governance could ever win over large sections of Hong Kong society.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
It's really a